The scorching sun hung high over the military training grounds, casting long, wavering shadows over the dry earth. A warm, gritty wind blew across the field, carrying the scent of dust and oil from the parked vehicles. The usual sounds of distant gunfire and engine rumbling filled the air, but something else pierced through it. A sharp, relentless barking. It wasn't the casual excitement of a working dog. It was urgent, desperate. Ivar, a large, battle-tested German shepherd, stood rigid in front of an old M2 Bradley tank. His ears pinned back, his sharp eyes locked on the dark opening of the vehicle's partially ajar hatch. His powerful chest rose and fell with deep, rapid breaths as he let out another thunderous bark, straining against the leash in Maren Voss's grip. She had worked with Ivar for years, training him to detect everything from explosives to human remains. He never overreacted, never false alarmed. But now he was frantic. Sergeant Corbin Hensley, a seasoned soldier with years of combat experience, narrowed his eyes as he approached. "What's going on with him?" he asked, his voice even but cautious. He had seen K9's alert to deadly threats before, but the sheer intensity in Ivar's stance made something twist in his gut. That dog was afraid. Maren shook her head, still holding the leash tight. "I don't know," she admitted. He sniffed around the tank and just lost it. Before Corbin could respond, a sound came from inside the tank. Faint at first, a slow, dragging noise, like something shifting against the metal interior. Every soldier within earshot fell silent. Sergeant Tate, another member of the unit, instinctively reached for his rifle. "You heard that, right?" he muttered, his eyes flicking toward the shadowy interior of the vehicle. The noise came again, this time louder, a distinct scraping, followed by a dull, heavy thud. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't the wind. Something was inside. Corbin clenched his jaw and motioned toward the hatch. "Tate, check it," he ordered. Tate hesitated for only a second before stepping forward, weapon raised. Every muscle in his body tensed as he reached out and pressed a gloved hand against the cold steel of the tank's side hatch. Before he could pull it open, Ivar's barking stopped. The silence was even worse. The dog's growl turned low, primal, his body rigid with an alertness that sent a chill down Maren's spine. Whatever was inside that tank, it wasn't supposed to be there. If you want to find out what happens next, subscribe to the channel now. We're on our way to 100K subscribers, and every subscription makes a huge difference. Don't wait. Click the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss anything from this story. Tate's fingers trembled slightly as he reached for the metal hatch, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The late afternoon sun cast long, eerie shadows over the military training field, making the M2 Bradley tank seem even more ominous. The once mighty war machine now stood as a rusting relic of the past, abandoned in the dirt, forgotten until now. The air around them felt wrong. It was thick, heavy, almost suffocating. It wasn't just the brutal heat of the day. It was something else. The longer Tate stood there, the more his gut twisted with unease. Something inside that tank was setting off alarms in his brain, though he couldn't explain why. Nearby, Ivar's barking grew more erratic, more aggressive. His body coiled so tightly that it looked like he would lunge at the open hatch at any second. Maren had worked with the dog for years, and she had never seen him act like this. Not even when they trained with live explosives. "On my count," Corbin ordered, his voice calm but edged with tension. 3, 2, 1. Tate gritted his teeth and pulled the hatch open with a sharp yank. The metal screamed in protest, its rusted hinges grinding together in a way that made his skin crawl. And then the smell hit them like a sledgehammer. A wave of thick, stagnant air surged out of the tank, bringing with it a stench so vile that Tate had to fight the immediate urge to gag. It was more than just old metal and mildew. It was something organic, something rotten. The kind of smell that clung to your clothes and burned into your memory. Ivar lost it. The second the hatch was fully open, the dog lunged forward, barking wildly into the pitch-black interior. His ears flattened against his skull, his growl so deep and guttural that it sent a chill down Tate's spine. Ivar wasn't just alerting them. He was terrified. Maren pulled back on the leash with both hands, but the dog was out of control, his muscles rippling as he fought to charge inside. It took everything in her to hold him back. Tate swallowed hard and switched on his flashlight, his hands damp with sweat as he aimed the beam into the darkness. At first, it illuminated nothing but the corroded interior. Dust-covered walls, frayed seat straps, broken wires dangling from the ceiling. The place looked like it had been untouched for months, maybe years. A few discarded ration packs and bullet casings littered the floor, coated in grime. No signs of life, no movement. And then he saw it. In the farthest corner of the tank, hunched and deathly still, was a shape. At first, Tate's brain refused to register what he was seeing. The flashlight's beam trembled slightly as he adjusted the angle, trying to make sense of the shadowy form. A bundle of fabric? A discarded uniform? That's what he wanted to believe. But then the light caught on something pale, something human. His stomach lurched, a shoulder twisted at an unnatural angle, an arm stiff and motionless, the outline of a face half obscured by darkness. And then, the worst part, the empty socket where an eye should have been, black and gaping. It wasn't just gear, it was a body. For a long, unbearable moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the distant hum of machinery from the base and Ivar's deep, guttural growl, so low it vibrated in Maren's chest. The dog's body was coiled tight, ears pinned back, lips curled over sharp teeth. He wasn't just alerting to a body, he was reacting to something else. Something that still felt present. Tate's stomach churned at the thick, putrid smell seeping from inside the tank. He had smelled death before, in the heat of combat, after explosions and ambushes, but this was different. This wasn't fresh. This was something that had been left to rot in the stale, humid interior of the vehicle for far too long. The scent clung to the back of his throat, made his stomach twist in protest, but he forced himself to stay focused. Corbin took a slow step closer, his boots crunching against the dry dirt. His jaw was tight, eyes scanning the darkness of the tank's interior with a wariness that hadn't been there before. "Tate," he said, voice low. "You're sure it's—" "Yeah." Tate swallowed, forcing the bile back down his throat. "It's a body." His flashlight beam flickered slightly as he steadied it, illuminating the twisted, lifeless form slumped in the corner. The man had been there for a while, long enough for decomposition to set in, but not long enough to be skeletal. His uniform was still recognizable, though it was torn in places, stained dark with something dried and cracked. But it was his face that made the hairs on the back of Tate's neck stand up. It was uneven, warped, as if something had melted parts of it away while leaving other areas untouched. Some places were raw and inflamed, while others were dark, almost hardened, like the tissue had been eaten away by something corrosive. The patches of damage weren't uniform either. They were random, unnatural, spreading across his arms, his neck, his jaw. Corbin exhaled sharply. "This guy didn't just die in here," he muttered. "Something happened to him." Tate nodded grimly, his eyes scanning the cramped space for clues. The tank was sealed from the outside. There were no signs of forced entry, no bullet holes, no shell casings that would indicate a fight. So how the hell did this guy end up like this? He was still in his uniform, meaning he had been stationed here. Had they just forgotten him? That didn't make sense. Then something else caught his eye. The walls. At first, they looked like normal rusted steel, but as he moved his light, he saw them deep scratches. Not just a few, dozens running along the interior walls, the floor, even the ceiling. Long, jagged gouges in the metal, erratic, like whoever had made them had been thrashing, clawing, desperate to get out. Tate felt something cold settle in his chest. This man hadn't just died in here. He had been trapped. Then, before he could say a word, the radio on Corbin's vest crackled to life. One eye was wide open, clouded and lifeless, frozen in an expression of pure, unmistakable terror. But the other was missing. Not just missing, torn out. The empty socket was black, jagged at the edges, like whatever had taken it hadn't done so cleanly. Marin felt her breath hitch in her throat, her grip tightening on Ivar's leash as the dog let out another low snarl. And then she noticed something worse. The man's skin wasn't normal. Tate moved his flashlight over the corpse's exposed arm, and his pulse spiked. The flesh looked burned, but not from fire. A voice came through, breathless, urgent. "Sir, we've got another one." For a moment, no one moved. The radio static still crackled faintly as the words echoed in their minds. Another one. Tate's grip on his rifle tightened. One body was already disturbing enough, but another? His mind raced through the possibilities. An accident, a training exercise gone horribly wrong, something the higher-ups had covered up. But nothing explained the condition of the corpse in front of them. Nothing explained the missing eye, the unnatural burns, the desperate claw marks inside the tank. Corbin pressed a finger to his earpiece, his voice sharp. "Say again, Corporal. You found another body?" A pause. Then the soldier's voice came through, tight and uneasy. "Yes, sir. In the old supply bunker near the east perimeter. It's..." The radio went silent for a second before the soldier continued, his tone dropping lower. "Sir, it looks the same as the one you're looking at." Marin felt her pulse quicken. "The same?" Ivar let out a soft whine, his ears twitching as he sniffed the air again. He was no longer barking, he was listening. His posture was still tense, but there was something different now, like he could sense something the humans couldn't. Corbin exhaled, his expression unreadable. "Tate, Marin, secure this site. No one goes near this tank until we get answers." He turned to another soldier standing nearby. "Get a team to the supply bunker. Now." Tate forced himself to break his stare away from the mutilated corpse in the corner. He stepped back, trying to shake off the uneasy feelings settling in his gut. Two bodies, in two different locations, with the same horrifying wounds. This wasn't a coincidence. Marin pulled Ivar back, but the dog resisted for a moment before finally relenting. His ears were still pinned back, his breathing uneven. She had never seen him so rattled. It wasn't just the smell of death. It was something else inside that tank. Corbin turned back to the open hatch, his gaze dark. "We need to figure out what the hell happened here." Tate hesitated, then lifted his flashlight again. There was one thing still bothering him. The scratches. They were all facing the same direction, toward the hatch. Whoever had been inside that tank had been trying to get out. But then why had it been sealed from the outside? Something wasn't adding up. And as the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long, eerie shadows over the field, Tate had the sinking feeling that they were about to find out. The sun was sinking lower now, casting an orange glow over the training field, stretching the soldiers' shadows long against the cracked earth. The air felt heavier, charged, as if a storm was brewing, though the sky was clear. Two bodies, two locations, the same horrifying injuries. Tate couldn't shake the cold dread settling deep in his bones. Corbin's voice was sharp as he barked orders into his radio. "Keep all personnel away from both sites. No one touches anything until we figure out what the hell is going on." His usual composed demeanor was strained. He felt it too. Something was deeply wrong. Marin kept a tight grip on Ivar's leash, though the dog had finally stopped growling. Now he was pacing in short, anxious strides, his ears twitching, his nose sniffing at the air as if something was just out of reach. She had never seen him like this. It wasn't just the presence of death. He had been trained to handle that. This was something else. "Let's move," Corbin ordered. "Tate, Marin, you're coming with me. We need to see that second body." They moved in silence toward the east perimeter, a secluded area near the edge of the training grounds. The old supply bunker was a concrete structure, half buried in the earth, originally used decades ago but long since abandoned. The metal door was rusted, slightly ajar. Shouldn't have been open. A young corporal, Jennings, stood outside, his face pale as he saw Corbin approach. He swallowed hard and motioned toward the entrance. "Sir, it's bad." Corbin gave him a firm nod, then stepped inside first, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The stench hit immediately. Not just rot, but something acrid, chemical, unnatural. Tate gritted his teeth and stepped in behind him, rifle raised, the weight of it grounding him against the suffocating tension in the air. Then the beam of Corbin's flashlight landed on the body. Tate heard Marin inhale sharply behind him. It was exactly like the one in the tank. The same twisted posture, the same horrifying burns, the same missing eye. The man had been wearing fatigues, though the fabric was torn, revealing patches of his skin where the flesh had been eaten away. The look on his face, frozen in pure terror, made Tate's stomach tighten. Corbin crouched down, his expression unreadable. "Who the hell are these guys?" he muttered. "Are they even from our unit?" Jennings cleared his throat, his voice unsteady. "Sir, I ran a check. Neither of them are registered in our personnel files." Tate and Marin exchanged a glance. That wasn't possible. 2 dead men, found in a restricted military facility, and no one knew who they were? Corbin stood slowly. "Someone knows," he said darkly. "We just don't." Then Ivar snapped his head toward the back of the bunker, his entire body going rigid. He let out a single sharp bark, then another. And then, from deep within the shadows, something moved. Something is lurking in the darkness. What do you think Tate and Marin just found? Drop your theories in the comments. The moment Ivar barked, everyone froze. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating, pressing down on them like an unseen force. Tate's grip on his rifle tightened as his eyes locked onto the far end of the bunker, where the shadows seemed unnaturally dense. The air inside was stagnant, carrying the overwhelming stench of rot and something else. Something metallic, sharp, almost chemical. Ivar's posture changed. He was no longer barking frantically but had gone completely still. His ears erect, his entire body tensed. His breathing was slow, controlled, as if he was tracking something unseen. Marin felt the leash strain in her hands, but this time, it wasn't from aggression. It was from focus. He had locked onto something only he could sense. "Movement," Marin whispered. Though her voice was barely audible, everyone heard it. Corbin lifted his flashlight, sweeping the beam across the dimly lit room. The walls were lined with rusted metal shelves, broken wooden crates, and abandoned equipment. Dust hung thick in the air, swirling in slow motion as they moved. First, nothing seemed out of place. The bunker had been untouched for years, left to decay with time. Then a sound, a barely perceptible shuffling, like fabric brushing against metal. It came from behind an old storage rack near the back of the room, deep in the shadows. Tate felt his stomach tighten. This was the exact spot where they had found the second body, slumped against the floor in a grotesque, twisted position. They had assumed that was where the man had died. But what if he hadn't? Corbin signaled for them to hold their positions. He took a slow, cautious step forward, his rifle raised. His voice, though firm, held an edge of tension. "If someone's in here," he called out, "identify yourself." The only response was silence. Then, another noise, a sharp, raspy inhale. Tate's breath hitched. That wasn't an echo. That wasn't the wind. Someone or something was breathing. Ivar let out a low, guttural growl, his hackles rising again. Marin had to tighten her grip to keep him from charging. The dog's muscles were coiled like a spring, his body practically vibrating with energy. He wasn't just detecting something, he was warning them. Corbin moved in closer. "Tate," he murmured. "Light on that corner." Tate hesitated for only a second before angling his flashlight toward the back of the bunker. The beam sliced through the darkness, illuminating the space behind the storage rack. His pulse pounded against his ribs as his light landed on something that made his stomach turn. A face. It was barely visible in the shadows, but it was there. Hollow, milky eyes stared blankly in their direction. Unfocused but unmistakably human. The skin was almost translucent, stretched tightly over the bones of the face, sunken and dry. The lips were cracked, slightly parted. The figure sat slumped against the wall, its body unnaturally stiff. For a brief moment, Tate thought it was another corpse. Then it moved. The head tilted ever so slightly. The jaw twitched, like it was trying to form words. And then, in a voice so dry and brittle that it barely sounded human, the figure whispered, "Help me." For a moment, no one moved. The only sound was the faint crackling of Corbin's radio and the slow, labored breathing of the figure slumped against the wall. The words it had just spoken, hoarse, broken, almost inhuman, hung in the air like a ghostly echo. Tate felt his pulse hammering in his ears. His brain struggled to process what he was seeing. The man should have been dead. Every logical part of him screamed that this was just another body like the one in the tank. But it wasn't. The man was still alive. Corbin took a cautious step forward, rifle raised but not aimed. "Who are you?" His voice was firm, but there was an unmistakable edge of unease. The figure's breathing was uneven, ragged. His head lolled slightly to one side, as if it took every ounce of effort to keep himself upright. Up close, he looked even worse. His skin was pallid, almost gray, stretched too thin over his bones. His lips were cracked, bloodied, and when he blinked, it was slow, deliberate, like it physically hurt to do so. Marin's breath hitched. The same injuries. The burns, the peeling skin, the eerie resemblance to the corpse in the tank. But this man hadn't succumbed, not yet. Tate lowered his rifle slightly, his voice cautious. "What happened to you?" The man's mouth trembled as he struggled to speak. His throat was so dry that at first, no sound came out. Then, barely above a whisper, he forced out a single word. "Locked in." A chill ran through Tate's spine. "Locked in," Corbin pressed. "By who? Who did this to you?" The man's body gave a small, shuddering jerk. His breathing grew heavier, wheezing. Something about him was deeply, profoundly wrong. Not just the wounds, something else. His muscles trembled beneath his skin, almost as if something inside him was fighting for control. Ivar barked suddenly, a sharp, panicked sound. He backed away, tail tucked, ears pinned flat against his skull. Marin had to tighten her grip on the leash as the dog whined, tugging away from the man as if he wanted to run. Tate's stomach twisted. Ivar wasn't afraid of corpses. He wasn't even afraid of the smell of death. But whatever was happening to this man, he didn't want to be near it. Corbin stepped closer. "Hey," he said more urgently now. "Who locked you in? Was it an experiment? A training accident? Talk to me." The man's breath hitched. His jaw clenched suddenly, too tight, as if trying to fight against something. His hands trembled against the concrete floor, fingers curling, tightening into fists. The muscles in his neck twitched, convulsing under the skin. Tate took a step back. Something's wrong with him. Then the man let out a sound that didn't belong to a human. A guttural, choking gasp, half a breath and half a growl. His veins bulged suddenly, darkening beneath his translucent skin. His body jerked violently, his back arching against the wall. For a second, his face twisted in agony, and then his remaining eye snapped toward them, white, unfocused, and filled with something that wasn't human anymore. "Get back," Corbin barked. The man's mouth ripped open unnaturally wide, his body convulsing as a horrifying, wet, tearing sound filled the bunker. Tate's instincts screamed at him to move, and then the lights cut out. The bunker was swallowed by total darkness. For a split second, there was nothing, no sight, no sense of space, just the suffocating weight of the black void pressing in on them. Tate's heart slammed against his ribs as he instinctively shifted his rifle up, trying to see through the thick shadows. His flashlight was dead. The power to the bunker had gone out, but somehow even the battery-powered beams had failed. Then, from the darkness came the sound. A wet, grotesque cracking noise, bone-twisting, sinew-tearing. A choked, guttural groan that warped into something deeper, something wrong. The man wasn't a man anymore. Corbin's voice cut through the dark. "Everyone move! Out now!" Tate took a step back, keeping his rifle up, but he couldn't see a damn thing. He could hear it, though, the sickening sound of movement, of something shuffling unnaturally across the floor. Then metal screeched as a heavy shelf was knocked over, crashing against the concrete. Whatever was happening to the man, it was violent. Ivar was panicking. The dog's leash wrenched in Marin's hands as he whimpered, backing toward the exit, desperately trying to pull her with him. She had never seen him react like this, not even in live combat. A sudden, deafening screech echoed through the bunker. Not human, not animal, something between a scream and a gurgling snarl. It came from the exact spot where the man had been, and it was moving. Tate's mind screamed at him to act. He ripped the flare from his belt, yanking the cap off with his teeth before slamming it against the floor. A burst of red firelight flooded the bunker, illuminating the nightmare in front of them. The thing that used to be a man was standing now. Its spine had contorted grotesquely, its limbs twitching as if they no longer belonged to it. The flesh along its arms and neck had begun to split, revealing something dark, sinewy, almost glossy beneath. Its remaining eye rolled wildly in its socket, its mouth stretching impossibly wide, revealing a row of jagged, irregular teeth. And then it moved. Fast. Too fast. It lunged, knocking over crates as it barreled forward. Tate fired first. 3 rounds, center mass. He saw them hit, saw them punch into flesh, but it didn't stop. Go! Corbin roared, shoving Jennings toward the door. The young corporal stumbled before catching himself, scrambling toward the exit. Marin yanked at Ivar's leash, forcing the panicked dog to follow. Tate backed up fast, but the thing was already moving again. It wasn't just fast, it was erratic. Its movements were wrong, like it was still learning how to use its own body. But one thing was clear, it was coming for them. Tate reloaded. Corbin fired another burst, aiming for the head. The first round hit, but instead of dropping, the thing jerked violently, its head snapping to the side before twisting back. It was still alive, and it was still coming. Tate reached the bunker door just as the creature let out another horrific, unnatural shriek, and then it lunged straight for Corbin. The creature lunged with unnatural speed, crashing into Corbin and sending them both slamming into the concrete wall. The impact shook the bunker, knocking Corbin's rifle from his grasp as he hit the ground hard. Tate didn't hesitate. He fired 3 rounds straight into the thing's chest, but it didn't go down. The bullets hit, but instead of staggering, the creature twisted violently, like its body wasn't bound by the same rules of movement anymore. Its face was barely human now, skin peeling, muscles convulsing beneath the surface, something dark and wet pushing through. Marin grabbed Corbin by his vest, dragging him backward as Ivar barked furiously, snapping at the air. The creature let out an inhuman screech, its mouth opening wider than it should have, jagged teeth glistening in the dim light. Tate fired again, headshot. The bullet hit, snapping its skull back, but it didn't drop. Instead, it let out a deep, gurgling laugh, a sound that sent ice through Tate's veins. The bunker was too small, too closed in, they couldn't fight it here. Marin didn't wait for orders. She pulled a flash grenade from her belt, yanking the pin free. "Cover your eyes!" she shouted before throwing it at the creature's feet. The explosion rocked the bunker. A deafening burst of white-hot light filled the space, sending a shockwave through the air. The creature howled in agony, clawing at its face, its body convulsing. Dust and debris rained from the ceiling as the walls trembled from the impact. That was their chance. Corbin shoved Tate forward. "Go! Now!" They sprinted toward the exit, Ivar bolting ahead, dragging Marin behind him. Tate was the last one through, turning just in time to see the creature recovering. Too fast. It was learning, adapting, and it was coming for them. Tate slammed the heavy steel door shut, gripping the rusted latch and locking it in place just as the thing hit the other side. The impact rattled the door, a guttural snarl echoing from inside. For a moment, all they could hear was the creature's furious breathing. Then, slowly, the snarls shifted into something else. A sound that didn't belong in this world. Laughter. Low, guttural, knowing laughter. It sent a shiver through every soldier standing outside. Corbin stared at the sealed bunker, his jaw tightening. The others waited for orders, but no one spoke. They all knew this wasn't over. Finally, Corbin exhaled, gripping his rifle, his voice cold and steady. We find out what the hell's going on here. He turned to Tate, his expression hard. And then we burn it to the ground. The bunker door shuddered violently, the metal groaning under the force of something far too strong to be human. Each impact sent tremors through the ground, dust shaking loose from the concrete walls. The twisted laughter had stopped, replaced by deep, guttural snarls that sounded more like an animal than a man. Corbin didn't wait. He ordered Jennings to bring a flamethrower and thermite charges, his voice carrying an urgency that left no room for hesitation. As soon as the equipment arrived, they moved quickly, securing the charges along the bunker's foundation while Tate and Marin doused the exterior with flammable gel. The whole time, Ivar remained rigid, his ears flicking toward the bunker, his instincts screaming of a threat beyond their understanding. The moment everything was set, Corbin lifted the detonator. Without hesitation, Tate fired the flamethrower, sending a roaring wave of fire into the bunker's entrance, flooding the vents, swallowing the inside in blazing heat. The creature inside let out an unearthly shriek, a sound so sharp and furious that it made Tate's hands tremble. The metal door bulged outward, as if whatever was inside was still trying to force its way free. Corbin pressed the detonator. The explosion tore through the night, sending flames and twisted shards of metal high into the sky. The bunker imploded, collapsing into itself as the thermite burned through steel and concrete alike. The team staggered backward, shielding their faces from the inferno. The fire roared, consuming everything, leaving nothing behind but molten debris and thick, acrid smoke. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the crackle of burning metal and the distant howling of the wind. The ground was littered with embers, the intense heat still radiating from what was once a bunker. Ivar had stopped growling, his body no longer tense, and Marin finally let go of the breath she had been holding. It was over. Whatever had been inside that bunker was gone. It had to be. Corbin exhaled, his face unreadable. "We report this to command," he said. "No one speaks about what happened here." His voice was steady, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes, something Tate could feel in his own chest. He turned back toward the fire, watching as the last of the structure crumbled. Then, just as the smoke began to thin, something stirred beyond the treeline. A sound low, rasping, unnatural, a whisper of movement in the darkness. And then, from deep in the shadows, a single, broken chuckle echoed through the night. Tate's breath caught. The realization hit like ice in his veins. They hadn't stopped it. They had only set it free. Did you enjoy the story? Then hit the like button to support the channel and help bring more stories like this. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new video. What do you think about this ending? Leave a comment below and tell us. Was the creature really destroyed? Or is it still out there? Share this story with your friends and see what they think about this mystery. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.